right, welcome back. This is episode number 58 of Calibrated with Scott. I'm Scott, of course. This is going to be a part 2 to my previous video, A Bridge Too Far. So if you haven't seen that, go watch that. In that video, I discussed the recent events surrounding the Kerch Bridge. And today I'm going to be discussing the Russian response to this attack on the Kerch Bridge. Before we get into it, if you guys wouldn't mind liking and subscribing, if you're new here, it really just helps me. It's the easiest way you can help me out. If you want to share this video, that also is an amazing help. I appreciate everybody who watches and listens. And without further ado, let's get right into it. So last night, while I was actually recording my previous video, the Russian aerospace forces and naval forces launched a very large and extremely dense missile strike on Odessa and Nikolaev region. This came on the back of the Kerch Bridge attack and the ending of the grain deal. So the grain deal is done. The port of Odessa was a protected port. The port in Nikolaev was also semi-protected under this grain deal and through the humanitarian corridor. The Russians for a long time have accused the Ukrainians of smuggling weapons through this humanitarian corridor during their grain shipments. But, you know, the Russians continued to let the grain deal go on for whatever reason. And now that the grain deal is done, that humanitarian corridor is gone. And we saw a quite spectacular display last night. Here's some pictures of the port. You can see the damage is quite extensive. The videos of these missile strikes are actually quite I don't even know how to explain it. I've never been in a situation where I've had missiles landing near me like this, and it is very eye-opening to watch, to say the least. I've seen a lot of stuff throughout this conflict, and one of the more intense subjects is these POVs of people watching missiles come down. It's just not something we really get in the first world very often. So it's definitely eye-opening and interesting. But as you can see, the port, the grain facilities in the port are completely destroyed. I believe that this portion of the attack was a more symbolic than an actual target, like military target. They destroyed the grain elevator, the crane sort of thing that drops the grain into the ships, and the silos, as well as some infrastructure and oil depots around the port. This port is now out of action. There will be no grain moving out of it. The grain storage facilities around it have been destroyed. So Ukraine has just lost a huge piece of its economy, further piece of its economy. Ukraine almost has no economy left. And Turkey and EU now are unable to act upon Ukrainian grain. Part of the reason why I believe that these silos and port was struck was to send a very clear message. Ukrainian grain will not leave the country unless it's over the border, the land border. And that's a much more intensive task than doing it by ship. Ship is a lot cheaper. So the leverage that Ukraine had over Turkey and the EU is now gone. Food prices in the EU will now rise. Wheat has already sharply increased in price. And to add insult to injury, the Russians have offered all of the African nations that were supposed to be receiving this grain for free. So they're going to replace Ukrainian grain, and Ukraine is now in an even worse position than they were before the grain deal ended. I do believe this is why they attacked the Kerch Bridge, because they knew it was coming to an end. The Russians had openly stated that they weren't going to continue it, and they had to make some action before the grain deal ended, and that's what that attack was. The response from Russia was not only on the port, but it was also on a military base outside of Odessa, an airfield. The whole place was lit up. I mean, you can see the fires from space. We have the satellite imagery that detects thermal activity. So if there's a fire somewhere, like large forest fires, it will appear on this MER system. And the whole airfield was engulfed in flames. We haven't seen pictures of it. We may have seen one hangar, which I'll put up here. This could possibly be from the airfield, but I don't know for sure. these strikes were they were insane. There was a lot of missiles in a very short period of time. We had 4 salvos of missiles from Tu-22 strategic bombers. We had 4 or 5 salvos of missiles from the Black Sea Fleet, and we also had Garand-2 drones on top of that. Along with this, there were strikes in Kharkov, Zaporozhye, Nikolaev, all doing damage. We don't know so much what came out of those strikes. Those places are hit quite frequently. But in terms of the Odessa situation, the airfield is completely leveled, and the port is unusable. So that was at least part of the response. We don't know if that's the full response, but it was definitely something that was planned. As soon as the grain deal ended, Odessa now becomes a much more viable military target. The Russians acted upon that, and there you go. So one thing that I've seen a lot is that the grain serves no purpose. It was a civilian target, basically, and that the Russians are just acting out, lashing out and just attacking civilian targets. This is a complete falsehood. The Ukrainians were using this grain as leverage over the EU and Turkey. Turkey was very much dependent on Ukrainian grain and the grain deal. That's why they were pushing so hard to renew it. And it's why they kind of backstabbed the Russian agreement with the Azov fighters and started supplying military equipment to Ukraine, as well as the allowance of Sweden into the NATO alliance. But at the end of the day, Turkey is still going to be pragmatic with Russia because they want their gas hub that's planned. They want Russian tourism, which is vital to the Turkish economy. And now Turkey is going to probably need Russian grain. So this is a very dynamic and liquid situation, very fluid. What will come out of it, we'll see. I think that the Russians have now shown strength in this conflict, something that they haven't done for most of the time. They showed that the grain deal is done. It's over. It's never going to be negotiated upon again. And we can just forget about it. We can drop it. The port is destroyed. Ukraine has lost its Black Sea access practically. I mean, they can still go to the beach and hop in the water, but in terms of their ability to navigate freely in the Black Sea, that's completely gone. And the Russian Foreign Ministry has also released a statement saying that any ships traveling through the Black Sea heading to Ukrainian ports, their security cannot be guaranteed, and they will be assumed weapons smuggling into Ukraine. So that's pretty solid, that's a red line right there. Do not cross this. There have been talks about the Turkish fleet in the Black Sea opening the route up again by force. The Turkish Ministry of Defense or Foreign Affairs, I believe, has come out and said that Turkey will not be doing this. That is not going to happen. That would mean World War III, or at least a war between Turkey and Russia, and that's just not going to happen. So the Black Sea, the grain deal is dead. That's it. It's over. There's no more talk about it. And unless something dramatic changes in country, I do not see the discussion of Ukrainian grain being exported coming up for a very, very long time. Now to the counteroffensive. I just wanted to talk on a few points. We had some rumors the other day, and I'll post up a picture right here of the Rybar map showing that the Ukrainians had captured the heights over Klishchivka, which is a pretty significant achievement in terms of what they need to do around Bakhmut. Now, why they're fighting around Bakhmut, I don't know, cost-loss fallacy there, but they did actually take this fortification, and I waited to report on it because this area has been in the gray zone back and forth for a very long time, and we actually had Archangel Special Forces, which is a well-connected telegram, pro-RU, it's actually a military telegram, run by guys who have connections to people on the front or who are near the front. And they have come out and reported that the Ukrainians have been pushed back from the heights. Russian paratroopers re-entered the fortification, and the Ukrainians were forced to retreat. So Klishchivka is now back firmly in Russian hands, at least for now. We'll see if the Ukrainians go on the attack there again. Time will tell. The Russians continue to advance in the Shibyansky forestry north of Seversk. They continue to advance in the LPR on the Svatova-Kremenaya line towards the Zhibyets River and the Oskal River. So the Russians are making pretty serious advances around Kupiansk. In fact, the Russians are now saying that they have visual line of sight on the city of Kupiansk, which is a pretty big deal because there is one road that comes out of Kupiansk, and I'll show you guys right here. It supplies this entire bridgehead, and if that road is cut, that bridgehead is going to be in an incredibly difficult supply situation. Time will tell if the Russians are able to achieve something here. The Ukrainians had come out and said that there were 100,000 Russians, 900 tanks, which tanks can be armored vehicles, I imagine, but 900 armored vehicles at least, including tanks, and multiple hundreds of multiple launch rocket systems and barreled artillery, which is a very, very big statement to make, considering Ukraine is talking about attriting Russian forces in Zaporozhye, but the Russians apparently have 100,000 men and 900 tanks, armored vehicles, and hundreds and hundreds of barreled artillery and MLRS to use in this front, which is not being pushed by the Ukrainians at all. I do not believe these numbers from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. These numbers seem to me like an excuse for why Ukraine is losing territory to a force that should not be able to push them out. And that's due to the attrition that Ukraine has taken. Their focus is on Zaporozhye. Most of their artillery is down there. And we've had two articles come out that I wanted to talk about. The first one is from, hold on, let me see here. All right, here it is. The article says, U.S. and NATO grapple with critical ammo shortage for Ukraine. And basically in this article, the end result is that the Ukrainians are now typically firing between 2,000 and 3,000 artillery shells a day. That's incredibly low. They talked about the Ukrainians increasing their artillery usage before the offensive operations, trying to prepare the battlefield, and that just did not pan out the way they wanted to. And now the Ukrainians are only firing 2,000 to 3,000 shells a day. The Russians are probably firing anywhere between 10 to 20,000 shells a day. That's kind of been their normal. With the Ukrainian offensive heading towards them, it could possibly be higher than that. I just don't know right now. But that is a significant shortcoming in ammunition. And it really would probably speak to some of the reasons why the Ukrainians are not achieving more in this offensive. They're running out of ammo. They don't have options to fire 5,000 to 6,000 shells a day, which would be what is necessary to at least make some progress and disrupt Russian positions. And we have this article from the New York Times talking about, after suffering heavy losses, Ukrainians pause to rethink strategy. And in this article, they talk about how in the first 2 weeks of the counteroffensive, the Ukrainians suffered 20% casualties of their offensive fighting force. And in the following weeks, 10% more of their fighting force was attrited. That is 30%. And this article was written like a week ago. So things are not going good for Ukraine. They're once again attacking in the Orikhiv section, trying to push the Russians out. They have had no success here. This is the Robitny area. They are attacking with Leopards and Bradleys again. So I'll probably give another update tomorrow on how that went. We might get some videos of what's going on, but the offensive is falling flat on its face. It's hurting really bad, and the Ukrainians are starting to look like they're in a very precarious position. And I think that now is the go time for the Russians. The Russians have the initiative on other areas of the front, and they will continue to push and push and push. Now is the time. Before the rainy season starts here in a couple months, the Russians need to get something done. And I believe that they will. The Ukrainians appear to be incredibly weak right now. And we'll see how it goes over the next couple of days. Thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate you guys. I know that this was a kind of a quick little episode, but I just had to get back on here and do a part 2 to my A Bridge Too Far series. So there might be a third. Who knows if the Russians retaliate even further. We'll see. Time will tell. But thank you so much, guys. If you don't mind liking and subscribing, that helps me tremendously. Commenting also helps. Help me beat this YouTube algorithm and get this information out to everybody. I feel like it's important and it needs to be out there. Thank you so much and have a great day.